The layers of the atmosphere include the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. The troposphere is the lowest part of the atmosphere, and it is the part that we live on, and it contains most of the weather, including clouds, rain, and snow. The temperature of the lower stratosphere remains at a constant rate of negative 60 degrees Celsius. The temperature of the upper stratosphere raises to 18 degrees Celsius because of the hot ozone layer. The altitude is 17 to 50 kilometers. The mesosphere is the coldest region of the atmosphere. The temperature decreases to negative 100 degrees Celsius, and the altitude is 50 to 80 kilometers, and it protects the Earth from meteors by burning them before they hit Earth. The thermosphere is the hottest region of the atmosphere. The temperature is over 2,000 degrees Celsius. It is so hot that it cannot be registered on a thermometer. It is broken into two smaller regions, which include the ionosphere and the exosphere. The ionosphere has an altitude of 80 to 550 kilometers, and ions are present there. They are responsible for the radio communication. The exosphere, it has an altitude of 550 to 3,200 kilometers, and the air is so thin there that it has great visibility, and satellites orbit there. A greenhouse gas is a gas that traps heat in the atmosphere that causes the Earth to get warmer, also known as global warming. Humans produce 64.3% carbon dioxide, 17.0% methane, 11.9% other gases, 6.0% nitrous oxide, and 0.8% fluorinated gases. Carbon dioxide comes from the burning of fossil fuels to produce electricity and heat buildings, from burning gasoline and other fossil fuels to run vehicles, and from cutting down and burning trees or other vegetation. It stays in the atmosphere for 50 to 100 years. Methane comes from raising livestock, including cows and sheep. They produce methane as they digest food. Landfills contribute to the release of methane because as trash in landfill breaks down, it releases methane. Mining coal also releases methane because it is often found underground with coal and can be released during mining. Methane stays in the atmosphere for 12 years. Category of other gases include CFCs, which are chlorofluorocarbons, and they damage the Earth's ozone layer. Nitrous oxide comes from farming practices to add extra nitrogen to the soil, such as applying lots of fertilizer or burning fossil fuels, as well as some industrial and manufacturing processes. Fluorinated gases come from leaking coolants, including leaky refrigerators, freezers, and air conditioners in cars and homes. Some industrial and manufacturing processes, like producing computer chips, also contribute to fluorinated gases, and they stay in the atmosphere for thousands of years. El Niño and La Niña are opposite phases known as El Niño Southern Oscillation or ENSO cycle. The ENSO cycle is a scientific term that describes the fluctuations in temperatures between the ocean and atmosphere in the east central equatorial Pacific. La Niña sometimes is referred to as the cold phase and El Niño as the warm phase. This can cause global weather and climate change, and El Niño and La Niña typically last 9 to 12 months. And they also occur on average of every 2 to 7 years. But typically El Niño occurs more frequent than La Niña. The first major fuel type is oil, and some pros are it helps us become a thriving and developing world where lifestyles are better and safer than ever before.
Oil energy is a foundation of renewable energy. It is cheap, it's reliable, and it offers high density energy. Some cons are oil energy is one of the most pollution rich types of energy consumption that modern technology offers. It can cause health hazards when consumed at high levels, and it is dangerous, and dangerous employment opportunity is connected. Next is natural gas. Some pros are it produces little pollution than other fuel types, it is abundant, it is easily transported, it's cheap, and some cons are it's highly flammable and it's difficult to use. The final major fuel type is coal, and some pros are it has an abundant supply and it's inexpensive. Some cons are it's non-renewable, it could cause severe environmental, social, health, and safety impacts because of it, and it's the largest contributor to global warming by releasing a lot of carbon dioxide. The EPA's regulated air pollutants are ground level ozone, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, lead, sulfur oxide, and nitrogen oxide.
Positive feedback loops enhance or amplify changes. For example, a positive feedback accelerates a temperature rise and a negative feedback decelerates it. Both industrial and photochemical smog are forms of air pollution, but industrial smog typically exists in urban areas where factories burn fossil fuels, where photochemical smog occurs in drier sun areas and forms because of the increased usage of fossil. Both of these can create major health risks, including asthma, lung tissue damage, and bronchial infections, and heart problems. Industrial smog concentrates in urban areas and is formed from sulfur oxide, mostly from burning coal, water droplets, and other particles such as dust. Photochemical is a mixture of other pollutants, but mostly VOCs and nitrous oxides. From 2002 to 2011, it was the warmest record in Europe, with the European land temperature of 1.3 degrees Celsius, which is warmer than the pre-industrial average. The Arctic is also warming faster than other regions. The precipitation is increasing in Northern Europe, while in Southern Europe it is decreasing. This is expected to increase river flooding, particularly in Northern Europe, as higher temperatures intensify the water cycle. River flow droughts also are appearing more frequently in Europe. The sea level has been rising over the past centuries, and the rate has increased in recent decades. In fact, the rate of change is 3.2 millimeters per year. Ice has been melting worldwide, especially in the Earth's poles. And due to this, the heat is melting glaciers of sea ice, shifting precipitation patterns, and setting animals on the move, just like this polar bear. The biota includes all of the living organisms, including bacteria, fungi, plants, and animals that inhabit a given area. For example, global biota. An example of changes in biota include that freshwater phytoplankton and zooplankton blooms are appearing earlier, as well as plants are flowering earlier in the year. And due to the global warming, the migration rate of many species has shifted, which can eventually lead to extinction. The proxy indicators help us understand climate, and those include ice cores, tree cores, ocean sediment, coral, and pollen. Since the ice cores are located up on the top of the mountains, they have accumulated many snowfall over billions of years, and scientists drill to get these ice cores, which have layers in them, including dust, air bubbles, or isotopes of oxygen. And this shows how the environment was and the climate of the area. Due to the climate conditions that influence tree growth, the tree ring width, the density, the isotopic, the composition all reflect the weather and the climate and the temperature of the region where the tree is growing. Trees produce one ring per year. Because of the amount of sediment that builds up on the ocean floor, scientists are able to examine the past climates because they could find tiny fossils and chemicals that help them interpret the climate and the environment that it is in. Because corals build their hard skeletons from calcium carbonate, a mineral extracted from seawater, scientists are able to determine the temperature and the climate that the coral has lived in. The shapes of the pollen grains can identify which type of plant they came from, and since the pollen grains were at the bottom of the pond, lake, or ocean, the pollen can help the scientists interpret what the climate was in the area that the plants were in. The Kyoto Protocol is an international agreement linked to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which commits its parties by setting internationally binding emission reduction targets. The Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto, Japan on December 11, 1997, and entered into force on February 16, 2005. Although the protocol will put us on a course that is less polluting, less threatening to human health, less damaging to the agriculture and the international economy, it will be very, very expensive because of the new equipment, more efficient, more expensive technology that will be needed. Carbon offsets are a practical and effective way to address climate change and encourage the growth of renewable energy. Tidal energy is powered by the natural rise and fall of the ocean tides and currents. Some pros include that it's renewable, it functions at low speeds, and it has long lifespans. Some cons are it has to be close to land and it is very expensive. Ocean wave energy is captured directly from surface waves or from pressure fluctuations below the surface. Some pros include it has no greenhouse gas emissions, it is renewable, there is huge energy potential, and it is reliable. Some cons are it is very expensive and there could be habitat destruction. Geothermal energy is heat from the earth, and some pros include that it has minimal pollution and it is renewable. Some cons are that it is very expensive and electricity is needed to heat the pumps. Solar power is energy from the sun that is converted into thermal or electrical energy. Some pros include that it is renewable, it reduces electricity costs, and it has low maintenance. And some cons are that it is expensive, it requires space. Hydropower converts energy from flowing water into electricity. Some positives is that it is renewable, there's no pollution, and it is safe. Some cons are that it's expensive, drought could affect the system, and limited resources. Lastly, algae fuel is an alternative to liquid fossil fuels that uses algae as its source of energy-rich oils. Some pros include that it is renewable, it absorbs carbon dioxide as it grows, and production is increasing. The cons include that it is hard to grow because it needs to be grown under controlled temperature, and it is very expensive.